whenever we can. So I dropped in a little Vince Neil.
Nice.
On the cameo. The hey brother, rock and roll. There's some feel good things. It's Big 4-0. Happy birthday. I was like, yes. Okay.
Like is that how you would get? What do they call that thing where you can pay celebrities to like send messages?
Cameo.
So that's how. That's the cameo that you get from him.
Yeah, I'll tell you off air, but like there are local Denver people that do that, and they charge like $1 or something. It's so narcissistic. I will send you a video.
Me and Cecil are tight. I'll get him to do it for free. Congratulations on your gender reveal. Hope it's a girl.
Happy birthday, everybody. All right, happy birthday to the NFC West. Let's go on and start with that. Arizona. We're back. So says Vance Joseph. Okay, here we go. In 3, 2, 1. Well, Kyler Murray is already one of the best fantasy quarterbacks that there is in the nation. So it's more of the same this year, Bloom?
Well, there'll be more of the same. I mean, more of the same for fantasy. And what's next? I don't know. See, this is another one of those situations where, and Kyler Murray's good. I mean, he's good for fantasy football, and he's doing things that show that he made the right choice to play football. He's going to be a good NFL quarterback, and he's going to be a great fantasy quarterback. Will he be a great NFL quarterback? Is Cliff Kingsbury a good NFL coach? I don't know. 2 years in, I don't know. And with Murray, the question is he going to progress as a passer? Is he going to have a process? Is he going to have a process that intersects with Cliff's concepts in a way that makes this marriage come to life the way that we had envisioned whenever they had been making googly eyes at each other for years and years, and then Cliff gets control of the franchise and has the number 1 overall pick? And I think we can at least say he made the right decision to take Kyler and move on from Josh Rosen. What about fantasy? Well, this team's going for it. Man, the NFC West. See, this is the best division in football. Best division in football.
Yeah.
Not even close. Not even close. There's not. You don't have to pause and think, is there...
Well, think about it this way,
North
dude.
is okay.
You have 4 Super Bowl contenders.
Right.
You don't have that in the AFC North. Sorry.
No, sorry, Cincinnati. And Pittsburgh fans. Sorry, ourselves. So, look what they did. They traded a 3rd-round pick for Rodney Hudson. They got J.J. Watt. They got A.J. Green. They drafted Rondale Moore. They drafted Zaven Collins. So you're getting those, Vance Joseph, those jack-of-all-trades linebackers. They're going to get Chandler Jones back. It looks like that situation isn't going to be something that is a problem. Now you have J.J. Watt potentially with Chandler Jones. Think of Justin Smith and Alden Smith. They did lose Patrick Peterson. So that iconic player is gone. He's in Minnesota now. But if the pass rush gets home, I mean, this is the theory, right? If the pass rush gets home, then you can get away with poor corners. We'll see what Robert Saleh does with that with the Jets. But we circle back to Murray. And for the first 10 weeks, 10 games of the year, he was the number 1 fantasy quarterback. He was on his way to be, even among great fantasy quarterbacks, the best. Then he got hurt for 4 or 5 weeks or so. Not so good. And then he came back around in time for the fantasy finals, week 16. So there's a lesson here. Kyler Murray, with that style of play, is eventually going to get hurt, and it's going to, at a time that you don't like it, reduce his fantasy value? Or is it, if he can just not get hurt, he's going to be the number 1 fantasy quarterback? I know at the ADP that I can get him at, after Patrick Mahomes, a round or more after Patrick Mahomes, when he basically scored, even with that little stretch where he was hurt, the same as Patrick Mahomes last year. I like Murray. I like Murray at his ADP. I also like Lamar Jackson at his ADP. And there always is that chance he didn't have a full offseason last year. He only started concentrating on football 2 years ago. So he has a full offseason. Is this when things start to come together and we start to see him have a process and really take his game to that next level? I like the idea of having him on my roster when that happens, if it can. Even though there are a lot of potential right answers at quarterback, he absolutely could be the rightest of the right answers.
Yeah, and we need to talk about 2 situations. I know we disagreed on Ryan Tannehill yesterday, which is fine. But it's like, in my opinion, Tannehill's peaked, regardless of whoever you add. And then you bring up Mahomes. I don't like the weapons in KC as much as I like the weapons in Arizona. So again, like Kyler Murray, we've seen the best, and there might be the best of the best, right?
Yeah.
You're the best. Something like that. Like, you could hear that with Kyler Murray, like angels singing this year.
Yeah, and I think that we have to remember that he was doing this against the Rams defense. He was doing this against, 49ers defense. We'll talk about that when we get to the 49ers in a few minutes. 49ers defense wasn't the typical 49ers defense. It could get back to that form this year. So it's not an easy draw. Because this is the best division in football, it's not an easy draw to have those games, and yet it really didn't show up in his numbers last year. So there's a lot of reason to think that Kyler Murray, and the other thing is we can talk about Colt McCoy, you know,
Hey,
okay.
Chris Streveler played last year.
Yeah, he did. He's
So
athletic.
we saw, and usually we talk about like North Dakota State or South Dakota State.
Right.
This is just straight South Dakota for
Right.
Streveler. So preseason watch list, crazy deep dynasty.
Yeah.
I'll keep an eye.
Preseason DFS. But see, we turn the page and we look at the running game. Now, last year they paid Kenyon Drake and they played him like a player that you pay. You got to use him. Now, what if the running game is as non-existent as it feels like it might be? That's another accelerant for Kyler Murray's fantasy value, but you still have to make a decision about this backfield when you're in your draft.
Well, think about the smart things that Cliff Kingsbury has done. You mentioned moving on from Josh Rosen quickly, but then the Drake thing, it's like you pay him, you play him, and you go, oh, well, we are getting what we thought we could get. So let's move on from that. And you go grab James Conner. Okay, Chase Edmonds will be the lead back, and Conner will fit in somehow, some way. But we have to talk about these two, splitting time, splitting touches, and how that works out for Arizona. And the answer may just be more DeAndre Hopkins.
Right.
More passing game.
More passing game. Rodney Hudson maybe could help again firm this lineup. We like Chase Edmonds as a high floor play. And the way it's going, Edmonds is a hot hand approach. Really, that's officially what we have here, the classic hot hand approach. You have Edmonds 6th, 7th round. Connor more like 11th, 12th round, maybe a little earlier. Your results may vary in your draft, but you have to pay a premium for Edmonds. And some of that's because of that PPR high floor he gives you every week. Now, even with Kyler Murray scoring all those rushing touchdowns, Drake, I believe, was in double digits in rushing touchdowns last year. So if you just give those to Connor, Connor looks like a value. Basically, Connor's one of those guys that you can take when the Cardinals are favored. And his chances of scoring a touchdown goes up. His chances of being the finisher go up. And maybe that's better for Connor. Because what's our problem with Connor? He can't stay healthy. Right. He can't stay healthy. But if he's used in a committee, in a thunder and lightning kind of committee, and when he's running hot and when the Cardinals run concepts are working and their line is putting lean on the opponent, then maybe he does get a 20 carry game and get going. But Edmonds also, he showed that game against the Giants a few years back that he can also bring this running game to life when it's working. So he could be just as likely to be that hot hand, again, with that passing game involvement as the base for his fantasy value. So I think either of these guys could end up being a hit. It's not difficult to envision, but it's also not difficult to envision the Cardinals running game just staying stuck in neutral again. So this isn't like the Buffalo backfield. I don't know if you saw Zach Moss, a hamstring day to day. But the point is, when you look at the Buffalo backfield, the answer is probably none of the above. I don't know for sure if the answer is none of the above here because we saw production in touchdowns with Kyler Murray going off and because these are solid backs. Not great backs, but they can be good enough, especially if Rodney Hudson helps make this line come around.
Yeah, and that line and more emphasis on toughness. Oh, how about some lightning? You got a couple lightning backs here, Ito Smith and Eno Benjamin. Ito and Eno, see who makes the team. But Eno Benjamin, I remember talking to Herman Edwards about him before he came out. Like, watch out, electric, all this. And it's preseason watch list. So guys like Ito Smith, who we know his game, and now in Arizona, and Eno Benjamin, who if you know Arizona State, you know his game and what he can be with that football in his hands. Preseason watch list, Bloom, I'll be watching those two. Those are the ones that jump out to me.
And it seems like Eno, the 7th-round pick last year, local guy, isn't really making an impression on the coaches, a good impression at least. He's making an impression because they bring in Ito Smith. And I think Jonathan Ward was listed ahead of him on the depth chart. So we do want to know who the third running back is. If we have misgivings about Connor's ability to stay healthy, if we have misgivings about Edmonds really being a between the tackles back, who's the next guy? Well, Ito Smith is even less equipped to run between the tackles than Edmonds. He might be the number 3 back, though. Ward also not necessarily an every down back type. Even Eno Benjamin's not necessarily an every down back type. So I don't know if there's a guy here. See, again, we come back to the idea that answer on the multiple choice test that just the Cardinals running game is going to be miserable again. You start to see more and more scenarios where that can happen.
You see more and more scenarios when that can happen, but I'll tell you what else you see. New fantasy contests that make you happy. Are you tired of the same old fantasy contest? Think you have what it takes to flex on the competition and win this season's hottest fantasy football contest? It is Fan Up. Download the app that everyone is talking about. Fan Up on the App Store for Apple. Must be 18 years or older to play. Restrictions apply per state. Join an awesome community of over 50,000 fantasy and esports fans who love to compete against each other and team up as friends for the ultimate prizes and bragging rights. That is Fan Up. Simply pick your starting 7 players every week of the NFL regular season. Your flex player has 1.5 times multiplier, hence the contest title, Flex Frenzy. Watch your players rack up fantasy points in real time and talk trash with the best of them in a robust social community. That is Fan Up. Fan Up and just be fans. Okay, just be a fan of DeAndre Hopkins. Yes, please. And then AJ Green. Fresh start, new stuff, right? I think, we know what to expect from Nuke Bloom. But AJ Green, staying healthy. What does he have left in the tank? How does he fit in with this team? And, we won't be talking about Larry Fitzgerald. Oh, man. But we'll talk about AJ Green, so let's do it.
Yes. And this is a difficult situation to solve. I'll start with Hopkins. I like taking all these guys together. Hopkins has a high floor, obviously. But if you look at his usage last year, it was totally unimaginative. And teams started to catch on. And you have now better options as the number 2, 3, and 4 options. You hope, again, Kyler Murray, have a process. Merge with these concepts so that the offense doesn't become predictable. You're looking at Hopkins next to, in the second round, Cecil Lammey said it first, folks, second round, important part of the draft. Hopkins against Ridley, Hopkins against Jefferson, Hopkins against A.J. Brown, Hopkins against DK Metcalf.
That's a no on all those.
You mean take Hopkins or don't take Hopkins?
No, that means no, I'm not taking Hopkins.
Exactly. Hopkins, and he's not in the decline phase of his career yet, but if he's at his peak, he's just in the tail end of his peak. We've seen the best football we're going to see from him probably. So I don't like Hopkins in the second round. I want somebody who can greatly surpass what Hopkins has done in the past, especially based on the way the air is playing. And then you get into these other guys. I don't know how to untangle this. It seems like to me like the most likely scenario is week to week there'll be players that have big games out of these 3, but it won't be predictable. Like look at what Christian Kirk did. There was a 3 or 4 week stretch last year in the middle of the season that he was a number 1 fantasy receiver. The deep game between Murray and Kirk was hooking up. But again, there was not very many options other than Kirk. And then Kirk faded. So first, let's ask this question. Who is most likely to play in a way to just force Murray and the Cardinals to use him? That's Rondale Moore.
That's Rondale Moore. Rondale Moore, one of the most explosive players ever coming into the league. Like ever. Now, a little bit of a hamstring thing. You're always worried about that with Rondale Moore. But he is a field flipper. One of those, and he's not a gadget guy, right? This isn't Kadarius Toney. You're talking about a real legitimate receiver with cutting ability, doesn't lose much at speed, quickness with the sickness. Like this guy's got it all. One of the most exciting players to come into the league.
Right. So I think Moore is the one that you're targeting in the second half of your draft. And durability was an issue at Purdue. Also, freshman Moore was probably the best Moore that we saw at Purdue, and you wondered, did he lose the burst? Did he lose the acceleration? Did the injuries take something from him? Based on all the reports out of camp, based on what we've seen in camp, I don't think so. I think he's going to translate as long as he stays healthy. But a Moore injury where he missed more time, that could open up something for Kirk, who's still on the upslope of his career, and again has that deep ball game with Kyler Murray. And then there's A.J. Green, and they paid him. And they didn't have to go get A.J. Green. I mean, they didn't bring back Larry Fitzgerald, but a big slot. There's a lot of players who could play that big slot role for them. They're going to use A.J. Green. He's going to be frustrating to the tune of 100 targets in this offense, or 80. Enough targets, again, that it may be that razor's edge between Moore or Kirk being fantasy relevant, especially if targets are being forced to DeAndre Hopkins. So it kind of makes my head hurt. I think that if Kyler Murray makes a step forward as a passer, then putting chips on these secondary targets makes sense. But if you like those secondary targets, maybe you turn back around again and say, well, that just means you should take Kyler Murray. So they have those better names in the 2, 3, 4 spots. But after that, again, Cease, it's a story of how this team came in, Kyler and Cliff, and we're going to make things change, and it hasn't changed that much yet.
Well, and this is where is patience at with some of these players? Now, I know it's a win now type of league, but I still think Keyshawn Johnson has talent. I still think Andy Isabella has ways that you can use him, obviously with that speed. So you had a couple of guys that you've just bailed on. Hell, what's his name? Why am I forgetting his name? Big-bodied kid. They already gave up
Texas
on.
Tech? No, you mean Hakeem Butler, who's in
Hakeem Butler. Yeah, so they already gave up on him, right? The same class as those two, I believe. So, like, I understand and I praise them for, figuring out Drake. Oh, it's not working. And Rosen, they're just like, see ya. But these two, it's like, okay, I could see a point where Keyshawn Johnson does work out. Maybe he's not the greatest ever, but like a solid receiver, more than fifth, sixth, whatever it is, will even make the team. So Keyshawn, Andy Isabella, I'm still watching him in the preseason watch list. And I'll have a little more patience than Cliff Kingsbury.
And you watch them because, again, this was the opening shots fired across the bow of the rest of the league, the rest of the division, whenever they took Isabella in the second. That's basically the pick they got for not for DeAndre Hopkins, for Rosen. They take Johnson, Butler in the fourth, he gone already, and then Johnson in the sixth. And none of these guys are even in the top four going into their third year. That's not good. That's a failure, honestly. So you're right, Cease. You could see something start to develop. Isabella's speed, and maybe it is a lack of imagination, because Isabella was one of those players that has tremendous speed, but didn't necessarily have the skill or the ability for that to translate as an outside receiver in the NFL. So he is more of a specialized use player. That's not really what you use a second-round pick on. Okay, but you can still find a use for him. The other guy I mentioned here is Antoine Wesley. I only mentioned him, Cease, because I remember watching J.J. Arcega-Whiteside and Wesley back-to-back, and I think Wesley's better. And I mean, maybe the answer was neither, but I think Wesley still has a better chance of making an impact this year for the Cardinals than Arcega-Whiteside does for the Eagles.
That's right. Do we have to talk tight ends?
Exactly, right. I just have LOL in my notes here. Max Williams. Remember when we wanted the Steelers to take Max Williams and the Ravens took him? We're like, whoa, well.
What are you doing?
Max Williams
that was the Clive Walford, Max Williams, and then I liked Blake Bell that year, right?
Yeah.
Watch out, the quarterback convert from Oklahoma, Blake Bell. And, well, none of them did anything. So
sometimes it's snake eyes.
I mean, maybe I'll watch Demetrius Harris bloom, right?
Yeah, they just added him.
He's a player that we've, kind of monitored. It is preseason watch list, but Arizona tight ends, it wasn't just Bruce Arians. No. Like, they're just not, they're a non-factor.
Right. He's Demetrius Harris, right? If you were going to ask, where can a tight end sign during camp and end up leading that team's tight end group in snaps? The answer is Arizona.
The answer is Arizona. That is a wrap for the Arizona Cardinals on the preseason watch list. It is 32 teams, 32 episodes, and every skill position player that you want to know about, we talk about right here on this show. Do all those YouTube things like comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you never miss a vid. We will be, of course, doing the Rams next, which means you looked at Matthew Stafford. You saw what they gave up for Matthew Stafford. You thought they overpaid for Matthew Stafford, but oh no, Stafford has a trick up his sleeve. We'll tell you what that is next. There we go.
See, I got to tell you one Olympics thing to watch, and for everybody, the bonus with the bonus content.
I love the Olympics updates.
Yeah, well, it's over now, but it's all still rattling around in my head, right?
Okay.
So boxing, and one of the things, my stepfather was a boxer. We've talked a lot of boxing. I've watched a lot of boxing, right? And there was this fight, I think it was the middleweight fight, okay? And it was this Ukrainian who's just born to box. I think he hadn't lost since 2016, 62 straight fights. He was the number one seed. And against this younger Brazilian, with like a longer reach, maybe a little more athletic. But this Ukrainian, because boxing is just about like cutting off the ring or opening up the ring. It's like usually there's an aggressor and there's somebody who's trying to counter. And immediately the Ukrainian, like, he's just a wall of punches. He just comes in like an onslaught, like a tidal wave of punches. And for the first two rounds, the Brazilian, this is the gold medal match. The Brazilian, like, all he can do is just withstand the onslaught. And the announcers are talking about it after 2 rounds, because there's only 3 rounds. The announcers are saying, well, everybody knows what's going to happen in this fight. Everybody knows that the scorecards are completely in favor of the Ukrainian. And they're even talking about how halfway through the 3rd round, the Ukrainian is still coming. I mean, it's just his style. I mean, he's just going to come, and you're just going to have a face full of punches. At the exact moment that the announcer says, he's reminding me of Mike Tyson, he leaves himself open for this straight left, and the Brazilian knocks him out. And it's amateur boxing, so he got back up, but he was wobbly, and they're like, no, the fight's over. And the Brazilian ceased before they even start like attending to the Ukrainian. The Brazilian lands the punch, and immediately he just goes, ah! It was like, as Ray, hey, what's up, Ray, put it, it was like him against the world. Like because he said, as a competitor, because Ray was a competitive wrestler, that you feel whenever everybody in the arena has turned against you and said, you're the loser, you're going to lose, we're just going to watch you lose. And it was like the punch. Remember from Christmas Story when he finally gets the bully, you know?
Ragas.
It was it, man. It was the punch for like every person who was bullied who got the opportunity to say no more. You could see it in his energy. It was amazing. You can look it up. Sousa, Sousa. Just look up like Sousa middleweight Olympic. And you can watch like the 5-minute condensed bout. It's incredible. Absolutely incredible. I'd recommend everybody to watch it.
And that concludes your Olympic update.
Yeah.
In the intermission. All right, let's jump on in 3, 2, 1. Well, Sean McVay knew he couldn't win the way he wanted to win with Jared Goff, but how can he win with Matthew Stafford, and how can fantasy GMs benefit, Sigmund?
Yeah, that's the question, right? How do we look at this offense? This is a fun offense because it's an unknown upside offense. Again, the story I've told it a few times. I think during the Miami game last year, and this is obvious if you're watching the game, that's when Jared Goff showed the limits or how easy it is to bait him into bad plays. And I think that's really when Sean McVay said no more. We're not going to go forward with with Goff as our long-term quarterback. We're going to make a change at quarterback. And you saw it over the last 2 years as McVay was putting the training wheels back on the offense. It's not good. See, we talk about confidence a lot. You know what we don't talk about often is what happens whenever a coach doesn't have confidence in his players. Not good. Now he has confidence. You saw him gushing, McVay just gushing about Stafford. Now I got me a real quarterback. Yeah.
Right. Now, why did they do that, Bloom? Let's meta this and let's go on the couch a little bit. Why did they do that? Because the egos in the staff are larger than on the field. I want to run my system. Why can't he run it the way that I see it? Right. I am the genius. I am the perfect guy. And that's where somewhere Matt Waldman's like on my shoulder, right? Mm-hmm. Anthrax has a song that says Bukowski's on my shoulder. Yeah. I'm like, well, Matt Waldman's on my shoulder. And he's saying, Sean McVay's a fraud. Yeah. But hey, I'm smartest guy in the room. Just ask him.
So we'll see. So what is he envisioning here? You draft Tutu Atwell. You signed Deshaun Jackson. They did lose Gerald Everett. Of course, we know they lost Cam Akers before the season even started. So the idea of getting that running game going, which is important. Real quickly, too, on the defensive side, they lost a couple of key players in the secondary, Troy Hill and John Johnson. The other thing, Cease, not trivial, right? We talk about Arthur Smith and the Tennessee offense. Maybe the Tennessee offense will underperform this year and the Atlanta offense will overperform because Arthur Smith is an offensive genius, right? Brandon Staley, I think you could say, has at least the early parts of a resume of a defensive genius. Yes?
Yeah, for sure.
And we'll get into this in the Chargers episode. I feel really, really good about Brandon Staley as a head coach. Really, really good. Chargers fans, you got a good one. I think you got the best of this class, honestly. So
got a better head coach than the Broncos, yeah.
Ooh, Cecil. I love it, man. I can't wait to record tomorrow and we finally get to the Broncos. That's why we save the best for last. Vanessa Williams. Anyway, how is it going to affect this defense? This could be good for the offense because honestly, if the defense isn't a shutdown defense like they were at times last year, then maybe that's a good thing for this offense. They have to do more. But the offensive line is also a potential critical point of failure. So we'll see. But Stafford fits in there with Brady, with Tannehill, players that can be hyper efficient, players, especially in your 6 point per pass touchdown leagues, can rack up those 4 or 5 touchdown games because we just don't know, not just how can Sean McVay craft an offense with a quarterback as good as Matthew Stafford. And the other thing is Stafford. So look at all these things that are lifted, right? Stafford's not rowing upstream against the Lions.
Right.
McVay's not rowing upstream against Jared Goff's limitations. This is going to be fun. This is going to be exciting. I just hope Stafford stays healthy. I hope we get a chance to see what he can do with at least a competent organization, even if McVay is a fraud. And I understand, especially after Akers went down, I totally understand going into your draft saying, I'm just going to wait and take Matthew Stafford as like quarterback 10, 11, 12, and I'll count my money at the end of the year. That a lot of potential right answers at quarterback this year. Stafford could be one, and then that trickles downstream to other parts of the offense.
Well, and we also think about intent with McVay. McVay's going to want to drop 35 every week. And that's the thing. You mentioned defensively, the changes there and all that with Staley, but it's like McVay not only has the, desire to show how great he is, but also the desire to just keep racking up points just to prove. I mean, does he want to go for the record? Does he want to score 600 points? It's a 17-game season, so that record's probably going to fall anyway. But he's going to want to do that, and that's great news for Stafford. And then behind him, John Wolford. We'll continue to watch his progress and maybe say hi to Duck Hodges in the preseason before he's cut.
We know that McVay has some confidence in Wolford. I think that they're in a good spot, and finding that backup quarterback, it's a minor move when you can find a good backup quarterback that you trust and not have to pay for him. So good job, Rams, on that one.
Good job, Rams, on that one. And then, oh, man. Here we go with the Cam Akers thing, and here comes Darrell Henderson, who's always had talent, hasn't stayed healthy. I remember, and listeners may remember, Bloom, you might remember, when the Steelers got Benny Snell, and we were both upset, and we were like, they should have got Darrell Henderson, and they got Benny Snell instead. What are they doing? What are the Steelers doing? Well, Darrell Henderson can play. It's just, can he stay healthy? And then the guys behind him, chat room's already talking about Xavier Jones. So, and Jake Funk, I believe it was our friend's roster watch. I don't know if it's Byron that's running the Twitter, but I think because they'll do a training camp tour, right? And I'll see Byron once in a while at Broncos camp. And a dear friend of the show, we love our roster watch guys. But I think they tweeted yesterday like Jake Funk does not belong on an NFL field. So take that for what you want, and let's talk about it. Let's talk about Henderson. Can he stay healthy? What is it? McVay's already talking about managing his workload. So that means Xavier Jones to the front of the line, please.
Yes. Xavier Jones is the clear number 2 right now. Let's start with Henderson. All Rolaids team. I'm going to mention Joe Wright a bunch of times during the preseason watch list this year. Love you, Joe. Henderson is absolutely on that all Rolaids team. I'm relieved if I don't have to think about taking him. And really where it comes in is, say, the 5th round of your draft, and you've only taken one running back, and you need a running back too. He fits in, Cease, with Mike Davis, with Myles Gaskin, where you've seen enough to say they can play, but they're getting the touches more by default. How often does a running back 1 by default work out? In fact, if you've been playing fantasy football long enough, you can probably remember a lot of running back 1s by default that you took and you wasted the pick. Not that they're not all wasted picks, but that's the running back dead zone. And Henderson's in there. Now, Henderson has great burst. Henderson can break long runs after contact. He's underrated as a receiver. But at the same time, this team is not going to trust him. See, I don't think they're going to trust him for more than 15, 18 touches a game. Maybe occasionally there'll be some games where he has more touches than that. But I think they want to manage his workload. But if he's the goal line back and he gets 2 or 3 catches a game, he could still be a hit as a 5th round pick. But these kinds of picks don't work out. Now, Henderson's more talented. I think Nat has more talent than Davis or Gaskin, and this could be a souped up offense. So maybe Henderson's the best out of the 3 that you could get, but I'm reluctant. So then you want to know who's behind him, because if the team is going to, what they say right away, he's not going to play in the preseason, right? And that means he's entrenched as the number 1, but it also means that they want to put him in bubble wrap. They're not treating him like he's Alvin Kamara or something like that. They're just saying, well, we don't want to have to go to our 3rd string before the season even starts.
Right. That
is Xavier Jones, who does have the size to be a lead back in terms of bread and butter running game between the tackles. Underrated player. Obviously, they like him. See, like we always say, if a team is using a 53 on roster spot on a player that they're making a healthy scratch, then they probably see something potentially in that player's future. That's Xavier Jones. But after they get a chance to see him and Jake Funk and Raymond Calais and Otis Anderson, Calais and Anderson are more like scat backs, but they can play a role at least. Then they're going to look at the veterans available, and they'll look at the veterans available after the final cuts. And
Royce Freeman.
Yeah, sure, or Jordan Wilkins or whoever. And then most importantly, and who knows who else is going to be out there after final cuts? Lamar Miller, that kind of back, Peyton Barber, and it may be week 2. So what's going to happen? Week 1, the Rams aren't going to sign anybody before week 1, and there's going to be a big exhale, like, oh, Xavier Jones is going to be the backup, and maybe Xavier Jones will play well enough in camp and preseason to solidify that.
Right.
But don't count your chickens until week 2, because remember, veterans that are on the roster in week 1, their salary is guaranteed for the whole year. Lots of teams wait until week 2. This is exactly why the free agent wave goes the way it does. Free agents signed after a certain date don't count against the compensatory formula. So you'll see teams like, when are they going to do something about this? Well, they wait, and they wait because it's in their interest to wait. It's in the Rams' interest to wait until week 2 to do something about this backfield. So for now, Xavier Jones is set up as an injury upside play. That may not be true come week 2. They play Chicago week 1. We'll see what happens in that tilt. Some intrigue here. And again, the Rams hoping not much more after they lost their lead back before training camp even started.
Chicago and the Rams, huh?
Yeah.
Like two smart guys slap fighting in the parking lot. Anyway, let's talk about Fan Up. Fan Up and Just Be Fans. That's right. Simply pick. You got to download the Fan Up app. Okay, done and done. Simply pick your starting 7 players every week of the NFL regular season. Your flex play is a 1.5 multiplier, and that's why they call it Flex Frenzy. Sign up start this week and end Thursday, September 9th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Fan Up is crowning their first ever MVF, Most Valuable Fan, this season. Will it be you? Join that awesome community of over 50,000 fantasy and esport fans who love to compete against each other and team up as friends for the ultimate prizes and bragging rights. Get that app. Download it now. That app store must be 18 years older to play. Restrictions apply per state. That is Fan Up, the Fan Up app on the App Store. Fan Up and Just Be Fans. Just be fans of these wide receivers. Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, rinse, repeat, bloom. Let's talk about them. And then we'll talk about the new guys, including an old guy and a young guy that's a gadget guy.
You got to like Woods and Kupp at ADP, 4th round or so. Woods, we don't know what he can do with a quarterback who can throw downfield like Matthew Stafford. Best quarterback he's played with in his career. Kupp, we know what he can do with Goff. And like Tyler Higbee in December 2019, we'll get to that. Goff may have helped Kupp. Goff's limitations may have played right into Kupp's strengths. Mm-hmm. Now, that being said, and I forget who it was that told me this, thank you, Matthew Stafford made some nice numbers with Golden Tate. Tate, Cooper Kupp, in the vicinity of how you use them at least, even if they're not the same player, okay? So I'm not going to fade Kupp because even though this is what we're looking at with this offense, Cease. Lower pass volume at times, higher pass efficiency, more big plays. Stretching the field. This is what Atwell and Deshaun Jackson signify. And taking a step back here, too, I also think you're going to see all 5 of these receivers used. I think in any given game, every receiver out of these top 5 is going to get at least 5 or 10 snaps and a target. Because I think you saw some items earlier in the offseason that they were all cross-training at all the positions. Sean McVay loves this, right? Yeah, this is Sean McVay's vision. So that, again, could lower the weekly upside for Woods and for Kupp. But if this offense clicks, it won't matter. Bigger pie, smaller pieces of that pie are still more to eat. So I'm not necessarily putting a big underline under Woods and Kupp, but at the same time, I think they're nice, solid picks, especially as a wide receiver 3, fine as a wide receiver 2. And we turn the page to Van Jefferson. Van Jefferson they took specifically because of that versatility. He's the classic inside-outside guy and a professional, not just a tactician, I should say, a technician. And that works, again, because they can use him in a lot of different ways. And then you bring in, I think, your statement of purpose this year, signing Deshaun Jackson. And hey, if you use Deshaun Jackson 10 or 15 snaps a game, that can work. And remember, the tactical value of Deshaun Jackson is when he's on the field, the deep safety has to account for him.
Yeah, and they'll only throw to him 3 times a game, but he could have 2 for 120 and 2 touchdowns. Right. That's how it goes with Jackson.
And open up things for Tyler Higbee underneath, open up things for the running game, open up things for Cooper Kupp underneath, because the safeties have to watch him, and Tutu Atwell. And Tutu Atwell, this is a real interesting one in terms of football draft theory, right? Because Tutu's 150 pounds dripping wet?
Like
right?
5'7",
5'7",
whatever.
yeah. So there was a time that NFL would say no to that body type at wide receiver, but things have changed. We've seen, hey, Devontae Smith went in the top 12, right? So it's changing, and Tutu Atwell does have that fast speed. And again, now imagine if you have, say, Atwell in the slot in a 4-wide set, and then Jackson opposite him outside. Now what do the safeties do? As long as the offensive line gives Stafford time to throw. But another thing that's beautiful here, I think McVay knows exactly what he has in Stafford. And Stafford, how many times have we seen Stafford do the no, yes throw?
Yeah.
And this can be that kind of offense for him. And I think McVay is going to allow him to play at that razor's edge of big mistakes and big plays. So this is something really exciting. Jackson's not going to have fantasy value. Atwell's not going to have fantasy value. Jefferson's not going to have fantasy value sustained week to week. Maybe there's some deep best ball league value here. But they could make Stafford and this whole offense a much better play, much more fun to watch. It's pretty exciting what they have assembled. Again, as long as that offensive line holds up and Stafford can stay healthy.
And call me a hater, but I'll continue to bet against the tiny guys. Like, I love Jakeem Grant. Love him. And it's like, well, that's Isaiah McKenzie, right? Hey, also Deontay Spencer, whoever. It's like, yeah. So the Tutu Atwell pick for me, Bloom, when it happened, I was like, great. Why? Like, I know you have designs of, but you can go grab some undrafted free agent. And so we'll see what Atwell does. We know what Tyler Higbee can do, and it's all him. We'll talk about his former teammate in just a little bit, Bloom, but it's a Higbee world, and we're just living in it.
We can look at tight end, and you see the big three. I hope Darren Waller gets back out there in practice any day now. I think everything's okay there, but I don't like that. But you've got Kittle, you've got, of course, Travis Kelce. Then you've got Pitts, Hawkinson, and Andrews in some order. That's your top six. And I think that's a pretty clear top six. I think rarely, unless people are fading Pitts, are you going to see that six. Maybe the order's different, but the names are not different. Who's the next best tight end out of that group? Every time I look at it, Cecil, I come back to Higbee. Every time I do. Maybe the December 2019 stretch was more about Jared Goff's limitations than how good Higbee can be. Because for fantasy, his ADOT wasn't great. His yards per catch wasn't great. He wasn't lighting it up, but he was catching a ton of passes. So again, that should make you circle back to TJ Hawkinson and say, could Hawkinson, if he stays healthy, catch like 100 balls this year because of how poor the wide receiver play is there? And they're going to be losing, and Goff's going to be playing a lot. But this is not a Lion show. It's a Ram show. We're talking about Tyler Higbee. Higbee may not get 10 catches, 8 catches because of how deep this wide receiver group is, because of how diverse this offense is. But he can also show us that he can run, that he's really tough to bring down after the catch, that he's got good ball skills. He's a rugged player who's also athletic and skilled. So maybe even if it is just 3 or 4 catches a game, some of those catches are 20 or 30 yard catches. Some of those are long touchdowns because that middle of the field should be open for him. I like Higbee. If you don't get, I really like getting one of the top 6 tight ends. And I'm coming around on Andrews because since we recorded the Ravens episode, Problemos, with the injuries in the wide receivers, right, that opens things up for Andrews to be a quasi number 1 target there. Higbee's not going to be a number 1 target. That's why he's not going in the top 6. If you don't get one of those top 6 tight ends, I think Higbee is a name that should be very prominent on your target list.
Very, very prominent in your download list is the Audible, the Footballguys.com podcast. It is the preseason watch list. Bryson Hopkins, I guess, before we wrap it up.
Yeah, well, and Jacob Harris.
Watch list. Yeah.
And Jacob Harris. Bryson Hopkins, they took in the 4th round last year as a replacement for Gerald Everett. And he's more of a receiving tight end than a blocking tight end. But I think they did the right thing by turning around and taking Jacob Harris this year because he was a wide receiver tight end tweener. Speed, size, skills coming along, had a really good spring, a quieter summer. But to your point about Tutu Atwell, Cease, why not Jacob Harris? Why not Jacob Harris in that complementary field stretcher role? They got him. I don't know that Harris is going to play a large role this year, but I think Harris is one of those players. I mentioned Darren Waller. You think about that paradigm of the size, speed wide receiver who may not have enough skill to make it as a wide receiver, but if you can put him at tight end, which they announced him as,
right,
could really have something.
It was funny before the draft scene, people argue about what is he? Where is she? What is he? Like, what is he? Like, well, we know now. And he can make plays. And that was a smart move, by the way.
Yeah.
to put him at tight end. So let's continue the preseason watch list. And it is 32 teams, 32 episodes, and every skill position player that you want to know about, we talk about right here on this show. And it is Cecil, Lammey, and Sigmund Bloom with a discussion about not if, but when Trey Lance takes over for the 49ers and why, in my opinion, that could be week 1. We'll talk about it next. The art of the tease.
That's very good. Very good. Very good.
So you got to change your ticket. You and Jason going back and forth on
Lance Lynn. I have to admit, I feel a little bit ashamed. Not really ashamed. I guess I shouldn't be ashamed.
Your mic's hot.
Right? I know, right? I can forget. Thanks for telling me I forget. So I know it started like 8 years ago, but I'm way behind the times. I finally discovered Topps Bunt Cease, the like digital baseball card collecting, and obviously a ridiculous baseball card collector. I'm sure that I had over 100,000 sports cards at one time. I don't have any of them now. That's a different story. But I discovered it, and yeah, there's like contests you can play to win digital baseball cards, and I had Lance Lynn in as my pitcher today. I'm not playing from Louisiana, so it releases all those endorphins. Collecting baseball cards still does it, and I just wonder when the NFL is going to get their NFT digital collectible going.
Yeah, all of us need to get that going, because that is the way of the future. Don't fight it. Don't fight it. All right, let's go on with the 49ers in 3, 2, 1. Trey Lance was always the quarterback pick. Don't give me this Mac Jones crap. All right, we've talked about it a million times. But Trey Lance is the pick, and he's the pick to start, Bloom. So I guess fight me if you will. I think he starts week 1. Why not? What's Jimmy Garoppolo got to do?
Not enough right now. He hasn't done enough. What he needs to do is more. And see, I eventually got to the right answer there. It took a little bit grammatically to get through that. You set me up well, Cecil. I should have just said more. This all revolves around this. Before I get into Lance and Garoppolo, let's take just a quick step back. Remember, everyone's healthy now. The defense is healthy. D Ford, for now, knock on wood. Nick Bosa. Yep. Remember this, too. They were able to secure Trent Williams services, and they brought in Alex Mack. Remember, Alex Mack was part of that great Atlanta offense that Kyle Shanahan piloted. This is exciting. You also have, on the other hand, you lose Robert Saleh on the defensive side. You lose Michael LaFleur. You lose a lot, right? Like just the Jets are 49ers East now, which could be a good thing, could be a very good thing, but there's some replacements. When you have what Kyle Shannon's built, you have a culture, you have an agreement on this is how we win games. So I'm not that worried about that, but I just want to, for the sake of being thorough here, putting this all out there. Trey Lance. Oh, that was fun, right? He's played like the 1-minute montage of all these little clips of us agonizing. Not Mac Jones. It has to be Trey Lance. I thought it was Trey Lance, but then all these people like Chris Sims said Mac Jones, and I'm freaking out about it. And then in the first round, when it was Trey Lance, oh, I'm getting chills, man. It was a beautiful moment. Moment. And dare I say, Cease, that even in Kyle Shanahan's most optimistic projections, he would not be where Lance is right now. It's August 11th while we're recording this. And what have we heard about Lance? Basically, everybody is dazzled by him, including his teammates, and maybe most importantly, his teammates.
Yes.
Don't believe anything Kyle Shanahan says. I know that we say you can't just ignore coaches, but there's some coaches, at least have shown us, they know the game. Don't believe what they say. If he says, because what have we seen already, Cease? There is no quarterback competition to, well, I'm not going to give Trey Lance first team snaps. Well, I'm going to give him first team snaps in situational. Come on. When the veterans on the team are saying he's got big cojones, right? Is YouTube going to get us for that? If veterans on the team are saying, wow, power running, the quarterback power lead at the goal line, we really like that.
Right.
You got to hold the locker room. If the locker room knows that Lance is better than Garoppolo right now, one of the things you heard, Cease, Lance needs to practice with the first team because he's just lighting up the second team. There's nothing else for him to prove against the second team.
Right.
come on. The
Dude,
writing's
this
on
is
the wall.
Russell Wilson, Matt Flynn.
Right.
And Jimmy Garoppolo is better than Matt Flynn, but that's
Right.
what this is. And the
Yeah.
staff is going nuts about the kid. The players are going nuts about the kid. Like, put the kid in and let him go. Let him grow and watch magic happen. Again, think of the division, Bloom. Toughest division of football. If you have a Trey Lance, nobody's ready for that.
No. And they open with Detroit and Philadelphia. So that's kind of like an extended preseason. Sorry, Detroit and Philadelphia, but that's kind of an extended preseason. You let him get his legs under him. And look, even if it's Garoppolo week 1, it's inevitable that it's going to be Lance, and it's going to be exciting. There's a lot to tease out here because, first of all, there's an interesting topic here of Garoppolo's due like 24, 25 million. Do they cut him? That's a lot to pay your backup quarterback when you can push that money forward. Do they trade him? Is Garoppolo willing to reduce his 25 million down to like 8 million with a bunch of incentives for a team that decides they need him to start? We'll see what happens. That's not Indianapolis, though. I don't know. There's lots of ins and outs here, but I think that we can see that this is going to be Trey Lance's team sooner than later. The other thing to watch here is Nate Sudfeld beating out Josh Rosen for the number 3 job. How does he feel about Sudfeld? Shanahan, that is, because that also feeds into this decision with Garoppolo. But for fantasy, what you need to know is Lance is going to start sooner than later. And Lance absolutely needs to be in your draft plans no matter what you do. Even if you take Patrick Mahomes, then again, this is what I say about tight end. Just because you take an early quarterback doesn't mean that you shouldn't take an upside number 2 quarterback, because then you're denying your opponents an out. You're denying the people who didn't take a top 5 quarterback an out and a way for them to say, haha, by week 3 or week 4, I have a top 8 quarterback now, so there. And that means if Lance hits the way we hope he does, you can trade Mahomes or whoever your other early quarterback is. If you have confidence in Lance, look, you're really going to take like Jamison Crowder or Russell Gage or someone like that over Trey Lance when we know Lance can be an insta-stud right off the bat. How do we know that? Robert Griffin III with Kyle Shanahan back in Washington was a fantasy sensation. We know now that he was playing with a very limited part of the playbook and a very limited decision tree. Trey Lance is going to be light years ahead of where Robert Griffin ever was at any point in his career in merging with the Kyle Shanahan concepts, which makes everything so much easier because that running game, remember, Alex Mack, Trent Williams, Mike McGlinchey, Aaron Banks, they got a mauler in the second round to play guard, showing a little bit of a change, Cease, because normally we think zone running game, you want those nimble guards.
Lighter, faster.
He's a masher. Okay, he's a road grader. So you have to stop the run first against Shanahan, and then that sets up everything. That's how we saw Robert Griffin III light it up as a passer and as a runner. And he didn't have Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel and George Kittle. He had Leonard Hankerson and Josh Morgan and Fred Davis, Aldrick Robinson, you know. Whew. I get hot and bothered, Cease. I get hot and bothered when I think about what Trey Lance can do with this offense, both in fantasy terms and how entertaining it can be. And it's exciting. Taking Trey Lance, someone said in the chat room, Chris Ostral said, you know, Trey Lance is for him like Kyle Pitts is for me. And I get that. I get saying, like, I'm going to take Trey Lance, and now it's to the world. I'm going to take him in the 9th round of every draft. Try and stop me. Go ahead and take him in the 8th round if you want. I'm taking him in the 9th round. I get that because this is one of the most exciting developments we've had at quarterback in a while.
No matter who your starting quarterback is, your second quarterback needs to be Trey Lance.
Yeah,
period.
I get it.
Bottom line. And if we were doing clips or cut see, I'm thinking promos, right? Like radio wise. This is why you listen to the Audible. Take Trey Lance. Yes, of course. Take Trey Lance. Take it. In fact, Bloom, I don't want to finish the team. I just want to talk about Trey Lance some more. But let's go ahead. Let's move on to the backfield that will, Trey Lance will make you happy. The backfield will make you pull your hair out because Raheem Mostert, Trey Sermon's going to get plenty of work. Wayne Gallman proved that he could work in this system. If Jeff Wilson was ever healthy, okay, everybody, Elijah Mitchell, everybody in this backfield can have success if they get the opportunity. Sigmund, it's San Francisco.
Right. Absolutely. And here's the good news. Because it is so difficult to decipher, none of these backs will cost you more than a 7th round pick. That's something, right? You're going to get a ticket, speaking of tickets, for potentially a lead back or a significant back in what should be a tremendous running game and a high volume running game, and not have to use one of your core premium picks. Now, we can step through these guys. Let's take the backfield as a whole. Raheem Mostert. Man, I love Raheem Mostert. I think he meshes well with this running game. He's the home run threat. The ideal usage of Raheem Mostert, and I think they already figured this out, you cannot give Raheem Mostert 15, 18 touches a game and expect him to hold up. It's just not going to happen. He's a sports car. That's okay. Why not Raheem Mostert as a change of pace? As a 10, 12 touch a game change of pace. Now, it's tough for him to pay off on that 7th, 8th round draft capital in your fantasy league if he's getting 10 or 12 touches a game, even though he will break some 80-yard runs for touchdowns. So maybe more of a best ball pick. And I also don't like the idea of taking Mostert and Trey Sermon. Let's just take the top 2 backs if you have a pick like 7, 8 turn, because now you're ensuring that one of those picks probably won't be a good pick. Just take the one you like better. I think it should be Sermon. Let's lay out the case for Sermon, Cease. They mortgaged their future to get Lance, and they still moved up in the 3rd round to get Sermon. Sermon meshes very well with his own running game. The only thing that Sermon's really lacking is that deep speed that Mostert has, that house call kind of speed. But Sermon immediately started taking first-team snaps in the spring and looked the part. Jeff Wilson, who has had some amazing games, as Eric Stoner would say, something like, the highest percentage of massive games out of his starts. Like if Jeff Wilson starts, play him. Is he going to start at all this year? Because I don't know when he's going to play. And by the time he plays, Trey Sermon could show, I can be the goal line back. I can do everything. I can do everything you can do better. Sermon could show that he's Jeff Wilson, but better. You have Wayne Gallman, who's every team should have Wayne Gallman. Every team should have a 3rd back or a 4th back that they feel like, hey, if he's our guy, we're going to be okay. We can handle that. So there's a numbers game here that when we start to get down to Elijah Mitchell, who I think they could look at as a potential 3rd down back if he can hold up in pass pro. He's got some straight line speed. He can get skinny through the hole and take off. And then there's Jermichael Hasty, who showed that he at least belongs in the NFL last year. So this is another backfield where I could easily see Dwayne Gallman traded for a late round pick right before final cuts, or Hasty, or I'm not going to trade Elijah Mitchell right after they took him, but that's the point. Mitchell and Sermon, so we could be looking at a Mitchell-Sermon backfield next year, or maybe even by the end of this year.
Right.
So because of Lance, and this is the other thing, what does Lance do in terms of the takeoff of this running game? How do you defend a Kyle Shanahan running game when it's 11 on 11? Not something. I'm glad I'm not a defensive coordinator. I'm glad I don't have to figure that out, especially when Lance can just wheel back and throw these 50-yard passes off of these odd platforms and make it happen. So I like Trey Sermon. I think Sermon is, especially in your big field championships where you have to be best out of 3,000 teams or best out of a few hundred teams, or even in the 6th division championship where you're the best out of 72 teams. Trey Sermon has that upside, especially when we get to December, to just be running fools over and be a top 10 fantasy back. If he is getting the most touches per week in this backfield, he's a top 15 fantasy back, maybe more. I'm real excited about what Sermon can do for this offense. I'm excited about this offense.
Trey. Just give me Trey, right? I want both Treys.
Treys. 6, 9.
Trey Lance.
Trey squared.
Trey Sermon. Trey squared. Trey Magnifique. I don't know.
Ooh, I like that.
I like it as well. That's right. You know what else I like? Fan Up. We can just be fans. Download the app. Everyone is talking about Fan Up on the App Store for Apple. Must be 18 years or older to play. Restrictions apply per state. Join that awesome community at Fan Up of over 50,000 fantasy and esports fans who love to compete against each other and team up as friends for the ultimate prizes and bragging rights. You know it's all about that. Sign up start this week and end Thursday, September 9th. Fan Up is crowning their first ever MVF. It's the most valuable fan this season. Will it be you? Get in that flex frenzy, baby, at Fan Up, where you can just be fans. All right, wide receivers for the 49ers. Amazing, incredible, awesome Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. The other guys we'll get to, but these two are the ones that lead the way, lead the charge, and get fantasy GMs super excited.
Absolutely. This is tough for me to decipher, and I think I'm overthinking it. This is the classic thing. Folks that have listened to the show for a while, what I like is I'm very fallible. I'm far from infallible. I like just coming out and saying, we're going to make a lot of wrong calls. We're going to overthink things. And I know that those longtime listeners on the show know my blind spots. They know my biases. And they know maybe to listen to me when I say, this is what I'm thinking right now, but I know I could be overthinking it. When Trey Lance takes over, or even when Jimmy Garoppolo is still the starter, if that's how it goes. We already know that Kyle Shanahan is content to win a game with 15 pass attempts. He doesn't care. He doesn't care. If this defense is better, how often does that happen? How often are they cruising in the third and fourth quarter? Again, this is why I like Trey Sermon. How often are they cruising in the third or fourth quarter when the quarterback is only throwing the ball 12 or 15 times? I'm not sure. So then what happens when you have, let's throw Kittle in here, when you have Ayuk, Samuel, and Kittle, and there's 15 or 20 pass attempts? Someone's going to be a bust. Or alternatively, week to week, Ayuk's going to have 4 for 100 and a touchdown one week, and then it's Kittle with 4 for 100 touchdown the next week, and then it's Debo Samuel the next week, or maybe some weeks it's 2 of them. So what I'm implying here is there will be high efficiency, and maybe the high efficiency be enough. Because if you take Samuel or Ayuk as your third wide receiver, and one week you get a 2 for 24, and the next week you get a 4 for 100 and a touchdown, you're okay with that as your third receiver. So I'm not trying to warn you off of San Francisco wide receivers, but at the same time, you're taking Samuel or Ayuk over players like Tyler Boyd, who's going to catch 7 balls every single week, right? Or Robbie Anderson, or other players you might like around that time. So it's not an easy call. And the same thing with Kittle. And it's not just my Kyle Pitts bias. And man, I wish Darren Waller was just in practice so I could make this a clear take. Because I think Waller is probably going closer to Kittle now, but a healthy Waller is absolutely going to give you a higher floor and a higher ceiling than Kittle. Because, again, Kittle is a guy that they're okay with. If they only have to throw to him 2 or 3 times in a game, that's not a disaster. That means everything went as planned, right? Kittle also doesn't have the greatest durability record, because he plays all out. He wants to put it all out there. By the way, kudos to him from coming back for Week 16 last year. The season was lost. He could have easily said, just going to drift into the offseason nice and smooth. He didn't. So I'm probably staying away from Kittle. That being said, it may well be that this offense becomes so efficient that it just doesn't matter, that volume just doesn't matter. Again, this all circles it back to be excited, to be really excited about what all these pieces can do together.
Be excited, except for the backup receivers, except for one player, and Chris brings it up here in the chat room. Now, I don't want to say who, Bloom, but let's just say I have friends around that team that are there every day. Every day. There's Jason's Vic Fangio impression. Mm-hmm. The one thing about Trey Lance is he's awesome every day. It's the best thing Vic Fangio can do. Anyway, so I have friends around the 49ers. Do you know what they tell me about Trent Sherfield?
He's going to make the team.
He's a baller.
Yeah.
He's a baller. Unstoppable. So, yes, Chris brings it up. Trent Sherfield. So, and these backup receivers, we know some of these names. We've talked about plenty of these guys. Hell, Jalen Hurd's never healthy. Juwan Jennings is interesting to me.
Sure.
There's good old River Craycraft. Like, so it's a walk and let's blast from the past. Richie James, whatever. Like, okay, yeah. Special teams, smaller guys, whatever. And Trent Sherfield is a player to certainly monitor in the preseason watch list.
Absolutely. So the one guy we're not going to monitor is Jalen Hurd. Can't stay on the field. And Kyle Shanahan's saying, I'm not getting enough opportunities to see him. We have to make a roster decision soon. That's bad. He loves Hurd. He took him in the 3rd round, and he's basically ready to say, if you can't stay on the field. See, what do they say? You can't make the club in the tub, right? You can't make the club in the tub, and he's in the tub. So Mohamed Sanu's probably going to be the number 3 receiver. He's still kicking around there. A useful receiver. For fantasy, never going to live up to expectations, but a useful receiver. He can throw a pass. He can block. Yeah, you like this guy. Then you mentioned Sherfield. And then at that point, you're looking at probably Richie James as a return specialist still hanging around. I still like Richie James. You have maybe Austin Watkins, undrafted free agent. Juwan Jennings, you mentioned, a big slot. A lot of interesting names here to watch in the preseason.
Mm-hmm. A lot of interesting names at tight end behind George Kittle, which you kind of gave the Kittle take already, Bloom. So let's just talk about this group as a whole, because whether it's converted Jordan Matthews, I was talking to one of the 49ers guys, I'll tell you off air who it is, about one Jordan Matthews. Like, hey, I think more players will be doing this. So preseason watch list, I'll watch.
Right. Kelvin Benjamin, that was short-lived. Bug Howard, failed wide receivers with size coming back as tight ends. Sure. I can see it. Ross Dwelley is a competent backup behind Kittle. Flirts with the waiver wire watch list, maybe, if Kittle goes down. And we end this exciting 49ers episode on maybe not the most exciting note, the backup tight ends, but it's okay. We need to cool down before we finish out the NFC West.
Calm down. It's okay. We'll be all right. It is the Audible, the preseason watch list, 32 teams, 32 episodes, and every skill position player that you want to know about. We talk about right here on this show, wrapping things up in the NFC West with a discussion about Seattle and why everyone's been fixated on Aaron Rodgers and the Last Dance. There's one of those that's going to happen in the Northwest. And we'll tell you why and how that impacts everything next. As DK Metcalf says, peace. All right. Your mic's muted.
It's telling me too. Mic is muted. I was trying to say something. Well, that was it. And the most profound thing I was ever going to say. It's gone forever.
Forever. It's in the ether.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I always wonder what you're smiling at back there.
Oh.
Say off air. Oh, mic's hot.
Cecil says he wonders what I'm smiling at.
The
show, the big show.
It is a big show. All right, we'll go on. Concentrate, Bloom. You have to concentrate.
I'll say this, Cease. I won't say it. I won't say it. Mike's hot.
No.
Mike's hot.
Can't say it. Don't say it. I can't see him. All right, let's go on in 3, 2, 1. Seattle is trusting in Russell Wilson this year for one last time, Bloom. They patched things up this offseason because there was something brewing, and I think it happens next year. But this last dance isn't just for Aaron Rodgers, baby. It's for Russell Wilson. How does he respond?
I think very well. And if you don't take a top 5 quarterback, I'm totally okay with Russell Wilson as the number 6 quarterback in your answer. Because in the first half of the year, it was a big 6. It wasn't a big 5. And that was how it was in the drafts, too. Russell Wilson was in that tier. In the second half, it fell off. Remember all the drama. It wasn't as big as the Rodgers or Watson drama, but there was drama. And again, as I've mentioned on the show more than once, Russell Wilson won. Russell Wilson got what he wanted. They traded for Gabe Jackson. They took Dwayne Eskridge, a wide receiver, with their first pick in the draft in the second round. And most importantly, they brought in Shane Waldron. And you know what's important about them bringing in Shane Waldron is that it's clear that Pete Carroll, and this is humility, right? This is management. Matt Waldman over our shoulder talking about management and workplaces and poor workplaces or workplaces that are good for the workers there. You can tell from the reports out of Seattle that Pete Carroll hired Shane Waldron and said, it's your offense. Go do what you're going to do. You know, Brian Schottenheimer's gone. And we don't know. Was Brian Schottenheimer bad for Russell Wilson? Schottenheimer and Carroll part ways, difference of philosophy. And that we thought meant we're going to even double down on the run, double down on don't turn the ball over or go for it on fourth down. And instead they bring in Shane Waldron. And this is really important, Cease. I think this is one of the stories that has been really underreported. Okay. Shane Waldron, what's the first thing he's done? Tempo. Speed it up. That sounds good for Russell Wilson. That sounds really good for Russell Wilson. Number 2, disguising the play. This is what, Cease, we have to pay attention to these things. Narrative matters in fantasy football. What are we hearing out of Seattle? The Seattle players are excited to play in Shane Waldron's offense. That's a good thing. You can't just put that aside, especially when Russell Wilson has shown such a wide range of outcomes, right? If they're hyper conservative, then Russell Wilson can make you wonder why you even played him or played any of his targets. But if they let Russ cook, it can be a key to winning your league. So they're disguising the plays. The run plays look like the pass plays. What has been the problem with this offense, Cease? Predictable. So predictable. And then boring. Boring, and then they know when Russell Wilson's throwing, and Russell Wilson is under attack and still making it happen. Like, how many times have we seen this script where they fall behind, and then they finally let Russ play in the fourth quarter because they have to, and he almost comes back or does come back, right?
And do you know what they did? And this is what caused the problems? Perhaps I'm revealing too much. They blamed Russell.
Yeah.
The staff blamed Russell, like, oh, it's his fault.
It's his fault, yeah.
That's why he's getting sacked so much. It's not us and our crappy offensive line. It's not us and our crappy game plan. It's him.
It's him.
And that caused the problems. And Russell said, no. I know my value.
Absolutely. So, yeah, Russell Wilson, he has in his range of outcomes the number one fantasy quarterback this year, especially if you're in a 5-point pass touchdown, 6-point pass touchdown league. Distance bonuses for pass touchdowns, bonuses for 300-yard passing games. Yes. Now, again, he's going to have to face the Rams defense twice. He's going to have to face the 49ers defense twice, but he's been used to doing that. Some of those games, maybe we'll talk about how the offense is coming into those games. Russell Wilson could be very, very good. And then we start to ask, well, what does that mean for this offense? Because we have to at least factor in to our projections that Seattle could be that first half of the year offense all year. You want to get a piece of this offense some way or somehow and see when it comes down to it, there's really only 4 players we're going to talk about as those pieces. One of them we've already talked about. Let's talk about the second.
Let's talk about the other ones. And Bloom, again, this division looms over this entire conversation. How are you going to compete with what the Rams can do? How are you going to compete with the Cardinals? How are you going to compete with Trey Lance? You better use tempo, and you better use what you've got. And that includes skipping over Sean Mannion. And everybody.
Geno
It's
Smith.
like, yeah, whatever. Let's talk about Chris Carson. Rashad Penny's never healthy. Just, whatever. Alex Collins could be fantasy relevant because, hell, Chris Carson's hardly ever healthy either.
Yeah.
But this is a Russell Wilson offense. This is a last dance, potentially. It's a Russell Wilson offense, which means what for Chris Carson?
Good things. Touchdown opportunities. He's showed he's a good receiver out of the backfield. He's produced a lot as a receiver. He's the lead back in a potentially great offense. What's not to love? Third round, I'm getting a lot of Chris Carson and a lot of J.K. Dobbins. And maybe Carson could even leak through to the early 4th round as your running back 2. I love it. You brought up Penny. Penny showed up slim down, 223, looking good in camp, looking good in padded practices, just needs to stay healthy. If he does, he'll cut down Carson's value a little bit. I think that a healthy Penny as the backup gets more work than a healthy Alex Collins. They do still have Alex Collins. Collins was having a good spring. So either way, you have some potential here. If you don't like Carson, whoever it is, Penny or Collins, has some potential value, although the lack of clarity there, because even if it's Penny to open, how long does Penny stay healthy? He finds a way to get hurt on very limited work. But it looks like the cleanup knee operation he had on that surgically repaired ACL knee went okay, so he's back. And we'll see. He shouldn't have been a first-round pick, but he's still a solid guy. He can still play. So can Alex Collins. And then we'll have to throw in there, it looks like DJ Dallas, as last I heard, is decisively beating out Travis Homer to be that third down back, special teams guy. But the backfield is not where the true explosive potential is. It is in the passing game.
It is those wide receivers. Before we get to them, got to tell you about Fan Up, where you can just be fans. Now get this. The Fan Up Flex Frenzy season-long contest is the perfect contest for you or any fan. So download that Fan Up app in the App Store. And remember that it must be 18 years or older to play. Restrictions apply per state. It's Fan Up, where you can join an awesome community of over 50,000 fantasy and esports fans who love to compete against each other, team up as friends for the ultimate prizes and bragging rights. Get into that Flex Frenzy, baby. Become a part of that frenzy on Fan Up, where you can fan up and just be fans. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. Now Lockett more, whatever. We love Tyler. Nobody's going to do. DK is the one where it's like, you thought last year was a breakout? Just you wait.
Exactly. And this is why it's not clear. And they may all be right answers. Ridley, Metcalf, Jefferson, Brown. They may all end up looking like first-round picks. We might be taking them all in the first round next year. So it's not like you have to agonize over it. Metcalf is easy to love, though, because of that deep ball. Because if there's somebody in the league sees that can give us a 4 for 203 touchdown line, like he can have 5 targets and be the number 1 receiver of the week, maybe the number 1 receiver all year, like the biggest game any receiver has all year on 5 targets, 5 Russell Wilson targets. That is DK Metcalf. Second round, I get it. I'm not going to talk anybody out of taking him there. I'm not even going to talk you out of taking him if you have pick 12 and 13 and you go Ridley Metcalf. Hey, that could be the ticket, especially if you can get Carson at the 3-4 turn, Carson Dobbins at the 3-4 turn, Carson Montgomery. I mean, that could be a league-winning first 4. But as is pointed out in the chat room, Justin B pointed out, Tyler Lockett's a lot cheaper. And Tyler Lockett remember, they gave him a big extension in the offseason, so they still like him. They don't see him as wearing down. Here's been the problem with Tyler Lockett. Last year, he had 2-3 touchdown games. A lot of people who won best ball leagues can look back at Tyler Lockett as a very important player for them because of those ceiling games. But in your typical lineup setting leagues in the second half of the year, week to week, we talked about this in the preview show. How many weeks in a row? Do you even play Tyler Lockett? So that is Tyler Lockett in a nutshell. He can win your week for you, but he can also at some point make you wonder, do I even put him in my lineup? Some of that was the offense being deflated last year in the second half of the year, but some of that is Lockett is the kind of player that once the injury seal is broken, he'll play through stuff, but he won't be the same. So that's why Lockett is so much cheaper. Look, I even understand going Metcalf and Lockett. I'm fine with that because of the growth potential of this pass offense. But see, so it makes you want to ask, because of Lockett, because of the growth potential for this offense, well, who's the number 3 receiver? And we'll talk about the receivers, but the number 3 receiver may not even be a receiver. Spoiler.
Yeah, spoiler alert. But the number 3 receiver that we will talk about that is a wide receiver is Dwayne Eskridge. Now, the problem with what is it, foot, Bloom, top of my head?
Toe.
Yeah, toe. I don't like the sound of that for speed guy because Eskridge's game is all about speed. It's all about taking the top off the defense, and it sounds great with Russell Wilson, but the kid's got to be healthy. So we got to put a pin in Eskridge, and that's the type of injury that can kind of just carry on. So Penny Hart, let's talk about all these guys. Cade Johnson, I compared him to Miles Morales.
Yeah.
When I saw him down at the Senior Bowl, I love Cade Johnson. So he's a sleeper dynasty guy that you got to pick up. There's Aaron Fuller. So some interesting names here at the wide receiver position, to be sure. Freddie Swain, can't forget about him, but
right.
it would be Dwayne Eskridge if he was healthy. Kid's not healthy.
Exactly. Last I heard, they were putting an orthotic in his shoe. We can talk to Dr. Gene about that, but that sounds like something he has to play through. It's something he's going to play through, not a recipe for a breakout rookie year. Penny Hart is a guy that we like. Penny Hart.
Love him.
I mean, Penny Hart was better than Andy Isabella at the Senior Bowl. Drink, everyone. So if there is a potential surprise guy that we're going to be talking about on the waiver wire, it could be Penny Hart. Freddie Swain has more experience, maybe a little more of a guy that'd be sure-handed. You don't have to worry about that. But I think Penny Hart can flourish under the big lights. And like you said, a lot of interesting undrafted guys here. Obviously, Cade Johnson is the guy I like the most here. I loved his tape. I was surprised he was undrafted, to be honest. We would have been talking about Tamarian Terry. Remember, there was a time Tamarian Terry was named as one of the top wide receiver prospects. Everything fell apart, and then we saw in his personal life, legal stuff, everything fell apart. So we barely even got it. We never got a chance to see even what he could do in the NFL as a big-bodied, downfield speed guy coming in as an undrafted free agent. But yeah, the name I think to remember here is Penny Hart. But really, the name we need to know in this passing game behind Metcalf and Lockett, not a wide receiver, a tight end.
Yeah, you love the tease now, don't you, Bloom?
It's just, we're like a trapeze act, like you're flying through the air, I grab you, and then I'm flying through the air, you grab me, and we just keep the whole thing going. And if we bounce off the net a couple of times, we just get right back up.
Hey, we're the Flying Graysons. Oh, wait, God, no. It's a Batman joke, everybody. Let's move on to Gerald Everett. You make the move, and again, Russell Wilson winning. How does Russell Wilson win? Get me a damn tight end. Team does that. They go get Gerald Everett. So, Bloom, the floor is yours. Let's talk about Everett and how fantasy GMs can be pleased with what he does.
Everett hasn't really flashed yet in his NFL career. Remember, it was the first pick Sean McVay made as the head of the Rams, second round receiving tight end. Never really lived up to that. And Seattle, who knows his game well because they faced him twice a year, goes out and get him. And who knows his game well sees Shane Waldron. So with all these concepts, all this stuff that Waldron is installing, old hat for one Gerald Everett, who is a straight receiving tight end, athletic, works in the middle of the field, hasn't put it together, but with Russell Wilson, with a high-tempo offense, with a team that doesn't have an entrenched number 3 wide receiver, now we're talking. Everett needs to be in that tier, just like we talked about with Trey Lance. Just because you take a top 6 tight end doesn't mean you shouldn't take your favorite sleeper in the second half of your draft. Maybe it's Adam Troutman. Maybe it's Blake Jarwin. Maybe it's Jonnu Smith. Maybe it's Gerald Everett. Reserve a pick for that guy because you want number one, to take an out away from a team that waited on tight end. And number two, if that tight end hits, now you've got trade potential with your early tight end. So it's very exciting. The Eskridge news, while you hate seeing a rookie slowed in his takeoff, I think that opens up the runway for Gerald Everett. But see, Everett's not the only viable receiving tight end on this team.
He's not the only viable receiving tight end, Bloom. So close us out here talking about these Rams.
Well, we'll see. We've got Waldron, Rams on the brain. Seahawks, Parkinson, Colby Parkinson, they took in the 4th round last year. They love him. He's giant. I think that he and Russell Wilson have some personal connections off the field. That's never a bad thing. And then Will Dissly. And Will Dissly is, I think, who the Carolina Panthers want Tommy Tremble to become. A guy that you know has that rugged fighter mentality, a guy that you know is going to be a blocker. But then you saw Dissly making big plays, and he only a couple of
classic overachiever.
Yeah, and only a couple of catastrophic injuries, a catastrophic knee injury and a catastrophic Achilles, kept Will Dissly from really taking off. And don't count guys like that out. So maybe he's lost a little bit of his physical upside, but we know he can play. So we want to know every potential viable name in this offense if we see this offense take off. There is more than a few at tight end. And let's just say this as we round out this division, because we get on the micro fantasy stuff. Every single division game is going to be must-see TV. Man, and I don't care what the records are. I don't care if teams have injuries. The intensity, and that's the thing. You can see the Rams and Seahawks come into a game with really hot offenses, and it's a 6-3 game. Or you can see the 49ers and Rams come in with really hot defenses, and it's a 37-35 shootout. It's exciting. All of these teams have really intriguing offenses. I guess we didn't talk about the Seattle defense. The Legion of Boom no longer. So,
right.
Jamal Adams, I mean, we'll see what the Seahawks defense can do. KJ Wright's still hanging out there as a free agent. So maybe that is the one defense that is, if there's a weak link in any of these 8 units. But that's okay, because that, again, it's just another argument for Russell Wilson and this offense to have a spectacular season. It will be a spectacular season to watch these teams battle it out. And at Cecil, you have to say that the team that can rise above in this division and win this division will be very prepared for playoff football and maybe should be your Super Bowl favorite.
Very prepared to make a run at it all. It is spectacular. It is the wrap of the NFC West preseason watch list here on the Audible. 32 teams, 32 episodes, and every skill position player that you should give a damn about. We talk about here on this show. A quick housekeeping note. If you love the show, you want to support the show, the best way to do that is to get a Footballguys premium subscription. We appreciate each and every one of you. And if you want to check us out, like, hey, I don't know if I'll get the subscription yet. Best way to do that is to check out our free daily newsletter. It's free. And every day, the hottest stories from the NFL, fresh to your inbox, with commentary from me and Sigmund and Joe Bryant. It's a nice little trio there. So go ahead and sign up for that free daily newsletter if you like what you see. And we hope you do. Then check out our Footballguys premium subscription. And that's the best way you support that show and this show. And of course, you support the YouTube channel by doing all the YouTube things like share, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you never miss a vid. And thank you, Sasha. He is Sigmund. I am Cecil. We are the Audible, everyone. AFC West tomorrow. So Broncos coronary. Sig, your mic's muted again. You can't make me laugh.
It is a Broncos show.
It is a Broncos show. Say it with me. Let's do that chant. But first, say this with me. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned and stay frosty.